One-way tickets, one suitcase, one guitar, and a one-year exchange program. This is my husband Peter and me in 1988 at the Frankfurt International Airport, not knowing how our future would look like, and certainly not knowing anything about the American culture. We had no idea then when people ask you, how are you, they don't really want to know the story of your day, or that they tell their children that Santa Claus comes through a chimney on Christmas, and that's the December 6th is St. Nicolaus Day. But we knew we had to take advantage of this opportunity and jump into the water and swim. And luckily, we kept our head above water, and we got to tour the world. We got to share our music, met many mentors on the way. But if we wouldn't have moved forward, we would still be dreaming about the possibilities. As jazz musicians, we have an advantage. We make our brains look like this every day when we improvise. Charles Limb from Peabody University looked at the brain of improvising jazz musicians with MRI scans, and he found that the moment we engage in this process, the medial prefrontal cortex lights up. This is the part that's responsible for freely connecting memories. It's a daydream-like stage, connecting dots, also referred to as divergent thinking in creativity theory. And at the same time, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the part that's responsible for judgment, for censorship, goes dormant. These two processes are separate from each other. George Land and Elizabeth Jarman were charged by NASA in 1992 to come up with a test for divergent and convergent thinking. And they tested 1,800 4- and 5-year-olds, and they found that 98% of them scored at the genius level. They tested the same children at the ages of 10 and 15, and also 260,000 adults. And here's what they found. The scores went down to 30%, then 12%, and only 2% of adults scored at the same genius level as all the 4- and 5-year-olds. Those are frightening numbers and the direct result of an education system that teaches those two processes at the same time. The moment an idea is formed, it gets evaluated for right or wrong, for good or bad, and little by little, those two capacities cancel each other out, and we lose our genius level capacities. I studied jazz jam sessions as a unit where jazz musicians usually get together away from commercial pressures, and you get to experiment with new options, new ideas. And I found that there were 7 factors that made this unit work towards creating this possible future. Factor 1, get to the best people possible. Knowledge is key. Factor 2, every participant needs to be willing and ready to engage in this process of ideation, of improvisation. Factor 3, there's a mentorship process in place where the more experienced ones help the ones with less experience. And factor 4, all of this is done in a completely democratic way with everybody getting the same space and the same opportunities. Factor 5, everybody takes a role. There's one leader, there's side women, and everybody does their role to the best of their capacities. And factor 6, the community, the environment, the resources factor in and play a role. And factor 7, throughout the process, there is an evaluation system in place with visual cues that shape the process towards the best possible outcome. This looking for new outcomes, for shaping outcomes in entrepreneurship theory. It's called effectuation. And Sarah Saswati, a cognitive scientist, looked at 27 expert entrepreneurs and analyzed 50 hours of interviews and 800 pages of data. And she found that they all had 5 things in common. They all start with what they have, then engage in the process of ideation. This is the divergent thinking again. Then they move forward with calculated risks, gather a team, and react to surprises on the way towards shaping the best possible outcome. Sounds familiar? It's exactly the same process as a jam session. You can also observe it in improv comedy, in any group setting where people get together towards shaping the best possible outcome for the future. Here's a few more examples. One of my students, also a jazz drummer who you will hear in a minute, he had the idea of staging concerts in dormitory rooms, similar to the tiny desk concerts. And he wasn't a videographer or knew about YouTube channels, but the idea felt right. So he moved forward, he found a team, shaped the process on the way, and created the tiny dorm concerts, a wildly successful IU venture. And then several years ago, one of my friends asked me, is anybody writing down all these stories and anecdotes and lessons you keep sharing about jazz legend David Baker? And I said, I'm sure somebody's taking care of that. And I asked David, and he said, well, Monika, it's one of these things. Everybody thinks somebody's doing it, but honestly, nobody is. And I took a deep breath and said, well, maybe somebody should. And I moved forward, found the options, gathered a team, and 5 years later was able to release David Baker, a legacy music. And one more example, last summer, WETF, a jazz station in northern Indiana, called me and said, you should start a radio program and talk to your fellow jazz musicians and share about the music. And said, sure, I'll move forward and shape that process. And it took me a minute to find out what I have to do and get the right team. But by now we are syndicated on 2 stations, and it's a YouTube channel, and it will be growing. So what does that mean for all of you? You're going, well, yeah, you're a jazz musician, you do that, that's easy. If we just learned earlier that every one of us is born, has the capacities, 98% of us have natural genius capacities of creativity. And our future looks bleak if we just accept the fact that 98% of us lose that capacity. All it takes is some deliberate practice of this muscle, this medial prefrontal cortex. All it takes is a moment of journaling. All it takes is cooking a meal from the ingredients in your fridge. All it takes is a moment of silence for this dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. We can take charge of our future and gather our team and move forward. We just have to make sure we keep practicing this medial prefrontal cortex, improvisation, ideation capacities that we all have, meaning going in the moment. One of my friends recently told me, if you're dwelling too much on the past and you're thinking too much about the future, you just miss the present moment, which is about anything you can do about. So I want us to go into this moment right now. I'm going to show you one of the exercises that I do to practice my medial prefrontal cortex and keep it at the genius level. We had some birthdays coming, but I want you all to come with me in this moment, and while I'll engage, let your ideas flow freely. What can you do now? What can you do tomorrow? What can you do every day to exercise like you exercise to stay healthy, like you take a shower to keep clean? What moment can you take every day to practice your genius level of creativity? So, let's see who the lucky birthday is. Sarah kept hinting all day that we will find out how birthdays sound in music. So this is one way how I engage in this moment. And I have the lucky December 17, 2001. So I have a child that's just 4 weeks younger than that. That's very cool. And what I do is, it's 1, 2, the first 2 notes of the scale, and then 1, 7, and it's 2001. So we have 1, 2, 1, 7, 2.